How you doing, folks? You're watching Live with Onrie, and I'm your host, Onrie Compen. There's a lot of changes going on as we enter the fall season. I have decided to start selling Eastern Shin through Facebook and other social media platforms. I'm still figuring things out, but with everything that's kind of going on right now with COVID, it's not really certain when we'll be getting back to conventions. And I really miss being out there with you guys and being able to interact and things like that. So I'm trying to find a way to make it work virtually. And I know it's not the ideal thing, but it is a way for me to kind of like not only interact with you, but to pretty much keep my business afloat so that once things do get back to normal, I have a place to return to once Comic-Cons resume. Which brings me to today's special guest. This guy is the master of Kickstarter crowdfunding campaigns, and he has he knows it so well that he's created a platform for other creators to learn. So it's just a basic exchange of not a basic exchange, it's an exchange of information where we can all kind of come together as creators and learn from each other. But he's kind of the guy who sees it all and knows who to talk to and all this stuff, and it is a tremendous honor and pleasure to have him here today. So please welcome TYLER James Vogel to Live with Onrie. How you doing, sir?
Hey, Onrie. Thanks for having me on the show. Excited to talk to you today.
Absolutely. I don't think I did a good job of introducing you, but I would very much love for you to tell us all who you are, what you do, so that we all understand why you're so awesome.
Well, let me tell you why I'm so awesome. Yeah, that's a great lead-in. Hey, I'm TYLER James. I am the publisher of Comics Tribe. We are a publisher of comics, graphic novels, and children's books. We have a children's book brand as well. But I've been publishing under the Comics Tribe imprint since 2011, but I've been making comics since I was about 12 years old. So long time. I'm also the host of the Comics Launch podcast and the founder of Comics Launch Pro, which is a community for writers, artists, comic creators, and especially people that are interested in crowdfunding. And I've sort of taken the lessons that I've learned along my journey and boiled them into a step-by-step path to build audiences and launch outstanding Kickstarter projects that'll help you level up your career. And that's what we do inside of Comics Launch Pro. So been in this game for a while. I learned a lot of lessons, made a lot of mistakes along the way, and a lot of what I do is designed to sort of send a lifeline and a rope back to the creators that are a little bit further on the journey from me, as well as also connect creators in my community to creators that are doing amazing things in different aspects of the industry as well. So through the podcast, through the courses and mastermind groups, and through my own publishing endeavors to bring the dream projects of myself and my collaborators to life, I get to do a lot of this, and I've been doing this full time for the last 4 years now, and it's pretty nice to be able to be devoted 100% to either bringing my dream projects to life or helping other creators do the same.
That is so cool, and I have so much respect for that, because given what we're going through right now, I have to say I found myself in a position, like once all the conventions started to cancel, I honestly didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And what I really admire about what you're doing is it's really kind of given me hope that, okay, you know what, we may not see conventions for quite some time, maybe well into next year, possibly not even next year. And how long am I going to be able to stay on unemployment for? How long is the government actually going to be, sending me a weekly check? At some point, that money train is going to stop, and I got to have a plan.
Yeah.
And I got to be honest with you, man. I checked. I've seen Comics Launch for the last couple of years, but I've never actually had the time to sit down and look at it, because it's just, between every convention, you just got so much planning and so much stuff going on, and running a Kickstarter campaign is like its own battle. So I'm just curious to know where did you start with Comics Tribe? And that's honestly, I apologize, because you're a comic creator first before you are an instructor or anything else. And, you fell into this field because you love it. So can you tell us a little bit about your origin story. How did you fall into comics?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty funny. I was few months back, I was cleaning out like the last remaining stuff that I still have at my mom's house, yeah, where I grew up, and I actually found a little video that I did for a high school project that was how to make comics the Tyler way or whatever. And so I've been sort of making comics and then sharing what I've been learning about making comics since I was in my teens. And so the fact that I'm still doing that now when I'm, as you can see from the gray in my beard, clearly no longer in my teens. The fact that I do that for a living now is kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, I started making comics when I was about 12 years old. I was the kind of person that, always had comics around. My mom was worried what would happen to me when I found out eventually that you couldn't actually be a superhero when you grew up, because she'd send me to preschool and literally every day I would come back having made a Batman utility belt. So I was always like into like comic stuff. It's going to be funny how my own boy, who's 2.5, I think he thinks he's a superhero now, because every time we go to the playground, he has to put on his superhero mask. So it's going to be, that's how we get him to wear it. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out for him. But, for me, I've always sort of loved the medium of comics, loved comic book characters and superheroes and that kind of stuff. But it was really, after discovering the comic book shop and then discovering Image Comics, when Image Comics first rolled out, that it dawned on me that comics and comic characters weren't just something that always existed, like air and water and lunchtime and bedtime. Like, they were actually something that was created by people. And so when Image came out and you had like these young guys that were, only a couple of years older than me, 10 years, that's kind of nothing. 10, 20 years, like these guys coming out of nowhere and starting this brand new universe, the Image universe, from whole cloth. And I could get in there on the ground floor, because that was the one thing that always bothered me about comics, is that I knew at the time, when there was no internet or such thing, no digital comics, etc., that there would be no way that I would ever read all of Spider-Man, or all of Superman. Like, I could just not get it. But the idea of getting in on the ground floor was great. And so I ate up that those early Image comics. But the thing that happened to me, and I know happened to a lot of creators now who are like, running the show now, that boom sort of like set off in me. Like, I started paying attention to the names inside the book much more than even the characters, because, hey, these people were creating these things from scratch. They didn't always just exist. These are creations. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start creating my own comics too. And so, throughout high school, I probably did some, 100, 120 pages of comics, about 4 or 5 different books, was running them off at my stepdad's office printer, hawking them out of my backpack in high school. And that was my thing. That was sort of kind of my thing. I made comics.
Who did you sell comics to in high school?
Anybody that would see me drawing or doodling on the side of my notebooks when I should be taking better notes. And then, or just, random people at high school, a lot of relatives.
How much did you sell each one for?
$1 a piece, man.
That's awesome.
And it was $1 a pure profit, because I don't think my stepdad ever realized how many copies I was running off. But like, that was, a time before I didn't know about comic book conventions. I didn't know that was a thing. Like, I didn't like, and I made every mistake in the book, because there really weren't. There was like that one resource, the how to make comics the Marvel way, and that was it. There was no internet. There was no training. There was no mentorship out there, like, at the time that I was aware of. And so you just kind of like went at it and sort of did it your own way. And so, from all middle school and high school, that was kind of my thing, and it was great. sort of lost touch with comics as I went to undergrads and had all that. And then my first job after undergrad was incredibly demanding and emotionally and, physically draining, teaching in an under-resourced school in New Orleans for a couple of years. And after that, I sort of ultimately found myself in a job that was a little bit less stressful, but I sort of hit a creative void. And I just there was something missing in my life, and it had been a while since I'd created anything. And it was actually a class on comic book script writing that I didn't even know that the classes like that existed, that I took at a continuing education, just a thing. It was like a 5-week course. And that pulled me right back in, and it made me discover that, a lot had changed in the world of comics since I had sort of been out of going to the comic shop every week and out of, focused on it. And I was discovering Brian Michael Bendis and, Remender and a lot of the guys that were the up and comers, Mark Miller, and I was really actually getting into studying the art of script writing, and comic book script writing. Because before that, when I was just writing, drawing, doing my own thing, I'd been making it up page by page, doing it on the fly. And it turns out that, most good comic scripts and comic books have a little bit more planning than that. That's why, in my high school, it's one issue was 22 pages. The next one was 16. The next one was 25, just random. It never occurred to me that, every comic that you've ever bought, just about every one is 22 pages. There's a reason for that. But you know what? These are things that you learn along the way.
It's interesting you mentioned that. So I've been editing a book, and the creator of this book, he had his first issue at 28 pages, which I'm sure from printing, it's kind of like an off number for printing, but now they've figured out ways to make it work. So, okay, you can have a 28-page book. You can do anything you want, essentially, right? But now he's got his second issue at 30 pages. And I mean, I guess, like I just said, you can do anything you want. But I have to question the theory behind that, though, because to me, I believe in consistency. And it sounds like you're the same way. It's one thing if you have a conclusion to your book, or if your launch book is a little bit bigger, like a giant size number 1, or your last issue, your number 12 or whatever, your number 4 is like a double size book. What's your take on that? I mean, is it that, do you believe that why do we fall into these consistencies? Is it because of profit, or is it because of presentation? What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things going on there. I mean, the one thing that I would say is there are real economic decisions to be made. 28, the difference between the cost between a 28-page book and a 30-page book is, basically just whatever the cost is for you to make a page. The printing cost doesn't really get affected, but there is actually a pretty big price jump from 32 pages to what the next size would be, 36 pages. And that just has to do with the complexities of how comic books are actually printed. And so these are some considerations that you think of. I often find that, though, is the thing with consistency is that a lot of times creators, especially indie creators, we are very resistant to putting any kind of constraints or restrictions on ourselves at all. It's we just want to create and be flowery and everything. But oftentimes it's those constraints that actually help set us free as creators, right? Because when you can do anything, your brain will go anywhere. And you will probably, if you are setting out to write, say, 24-page issues or 28-page issues, and that's the constraint, and that's the box that you're fitting yourself in, you probably tell a better story if you are working within a constraint. You can get to a rhythm, you can get to a cadence with how your things go. You realize that you don't have unlimited space, so you kind of condense certain things that you might otherwise expand and otherwise. So I do think there's some benefits to that. That said, occasionally there's time to break the mold. For Comics Tribe books, what we've tended to do a lot of times is that first issue may go a little bit longer. And a lot of that is just because the first issue has so much heavy lifting to do. You have to establish the world, establish the characters, establish the setting, establish the main conflict. You have to get the premise across, but then you also have to establish a reason to show up for the next issue. A lot of creators make the mistake where their pitch is their first issue, and they save like the big twist that's their pitch as the last point of the first issue. But a lot of times like, hey, I read what was going to go on in the syllabus or in the synopsis. There's no surprise there, right? And so a first issue usually has a lot to do. And so, we've done a fair number of our first issues have been a little bit longer. Oftentimes our last issues of a series, because we want a little bit more space, or we want to make little bit more bigger deal about it. But one of the best writers I know, John Lees, he's almost OCD in the fact that he wants to hit his notes on the same time and keep his page counts. Sync has been, almost all 24 pages. But occasionally we've broken that mold as well. So yeah, I mean, but what I would encourage you to do as a creator, especially one that is just getting started, is embrace those constraints. And in fact, if you've never done a full issue or a 24 page or a 22 page book, don't start there. Start with a 5-pager. Like, tell me an awesome 5-page story in the world that you want to do an epic for. And if you can pull me in 5 pages, I'll trust you with 22. But if you can't pull me in 22 pages, or if you can't pull me in 5 pages, you need to keep working until you can.
That is very sage advice, because the thing is that these constraints force us to become better storytellers. And issue ones, as you know and I know, are very, very hard. Like getting that concept, it's that pitch, right? And it's either people are going to be on board with it or they're going to move on to the next thing. And, that's especially hard when you're presenting a Kickstarter, because there's a difference, I think, in what your potential Kickstarter has to do, at least from my experience. And it certainly does not go anywhere near what yours is. But from my take, from having done 2 Kickstarters, I find that single issues tend to not bring in as much money as, say, a full trade, because the actual, like, people who are going to be backing you, they're going to want the actual item. And when you have the more expensive item, it kind of, brings up the amount of money that you can bring in. I could be completely wrong about this, and I'm please chime in and cut me off and tell me, feel free to metaphorically smack me upside the head and be like, no, you're wrong, damn it. But I'm curious to know, because I typically see it that way from also looking at other people's Kickstarters too. It's like, you have your number one, and okay, great, you got a new number one. What's your book about? Why should I want to buy it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot is going to depend, and you are right. Like, the price points that you're charging on your Kickstarter will have a direct impact on your bottom line. And all things being equal, if you're selling a more expensive, if your book is a more expensive price point, and you drive the same number of backers, like graphic novels tend to, on average, raise more than your single issues. But that's not to say that, but they're also going to cost more. They're going to weigh more. Oddly, comics are weird in that, technically, the U.S. Post Office lets you ship things media mail, which is a great way to save on shipping. Although if you have a comic book that's loaded with advertisements and things in the back, in your back matter, technically you're not supposed to ship comics via media mail, but you can ship graphic novels. So there is sometimes this weird thing where it's actually cheaper to ship a book like this if you're shipping media mail than if you're shipping a comic book, or a comic book and some pins. So there's some weird things that just in the vagaries of actually fulfilling on Kickstarter, and the revenue generation versus profit generation is definitely a different conversation.
Yeah. So even though what we see is this guy raised $5,000 for a single issue, but he raised $15,000 for his graphic novel, he could have actually made a higher profit margin on his single issue than his graphic novel, depending on how he handles fulfillment and depending on what his costs are and all these other things.
Absolutely. And also, while you probably would make more, if it took you 3 years to make the graphic novel, and you went 3 years without launching, and then you made $15,000, would you rather that, or would you rather, the experience that some of our members are having inside of Comics Launch Pro, where they're going the serialization route, and they're picking up steam with every time they launch a new issue, and then they also collect the thing. We just had a creator that did that, Newton Lillivois from Crescent City Monsters. He's been able to just build momentum every time he launches, and his last launch just set the world on fire for him, and that's one of the cool things about Kickstarter, unlike just about any other platform and unlike conventions and other things, is that we all know a number one, like comic fans, you can always sell a number one, right? And number ones are pretty an easy sell, but it's those subsequent issues that can be tougher to sell.
Yeah.
But what's cool about Kickstarter is, as long as you make it clear that every campaign that you launch is a good jumping on point, and you offer catch up tiers, and you offer and you still pitch it as if you're pitching it to the world. Most Kickstarter campaigns are finding that their backer counts go up and their funding goes up with each successive launch, which compared to like the direct market, we're happy if we retain 60% of our numbers for an issue number one when we're releasing a book to comic shops. If we're happy if we retain 60% of copies for number two, and that's
that number typically tends to go down. But of course, I think when we're in the independent world, because we're constantly pushing it, the issues that follow your number one, depending on how often you want to keep your book in print, are gonna obviously be higher than your issue 2s and 3s because your issue 1 has been out longer. That's not how the direct market works necessarily, right? Because you solicit, it gets put out there, and that's it. If it sells out at the retail level, you might get a request for a reprint, and then you can do something fun and cool over there.
But in today's market, there's just so much product out there that retailers a lot of retailers have moved away from sort of the extensive backlist, unfortunately. And so, we'll on number ones, we'll see reorders and things for, a few months after the fact, but then that kind of goes away. And there is that reluctance when all they see is, hey, here's number 6 or whatever on the shelf. If they can't get those back issues, they can't get caught up. They won't, more times than not. But Kickstarter is different because often those other, they can get caught up for well-designed campaigns. And so, yeah, it's really it's nice that is an option for creators, and especially with what's going on this year. Conventions are the bread and butter for so many creators. And creators can rely, like you get good at conventions, you do conventions, you can reliably, project what you're going to do. And you've got past historical sales and everything. And so that becomes like a bedrock of your business. And when that gets pulled away, I know there's a lot of creators scrambling. And it was interesting, because obviously my community that I teach and I sort of guide and lead in Comics Launch Pro, there's a lot of questions about like, hey, how's this going to affect Kickstarter? What's going to go on? And so, every month I've sort of been monitoring what's been going on the platform. And, we did see the comics category, like every other category on Kickstarter, just hit the freeze button, hit the panic button for a lot of creators. There was like about 100 project drop from what launches were like in April and May of last year versus April and May of this year. About 100 projects just kind of poof from the month before in terms of live projects, which told me that a lot of creators just froze. Like they're like, COVID is here. I can't, can't launch. And, but for the projects that did launch, a lot of them were having the best launch they ever have. A lot of them were seeing that like, oh, I'm getting Kickstarter traffic like I've never gotten before because everybody's online at home, right? Like we launched this book the week the economy shut, or the week the shutdown went into effect, and the week like after the stock market collapsed, and yeah, it was crazy. But we did it anyway because we had a plan and we had a team that was expecting this, and we had our vendors that were queued up and ready to go. And it was something that, Ryan K. Lindsay, Chris Panda, like they've been putting their blood, sweat, and tears into that book for the last year. So I felt like we had a duty and an obligation, and we could launch. Like we were in a position where we could launch. And so I sort of felt like we had the duty to, you know what, if we can keep on and carry on, like, let's do that. And we'll see what happens. And it worked out very well for us. And so most creators discovered that. And so what's happened is after it hit a low in April, projects on Kickstarter have started rebounding in terms of number of projects, to now where we're like close to an all-time high in terms of live projects on Kickstarter. And some of them are absolutely, demolishing, absolutely crushing it on Kickstarter right now. So, and the success rate for projects in the comics category have continued to go up, up, and up all throughout this time. So it's a real blessing that channel is available and alive and well, despite what's going on in the outside world. So I'm excited that you've been able to take advantage of that as well.
Well, actually, I haven't. See,
not yet.
No, not yet, because I decided to work on a new project. So I've been kind of like holed up in my den, and I finally finished my script. Like I have a full script right now. I just have to read it over, and then I'm sending it over to an editor. And so I'm so far away from doing a Kickstarter. And, here's my take on it. So, I did the last time I did a Kickstarter was at the end of 2018. And I did relatively well. Like I would say I made past my goal, and I learned a lot from it. I think that it showed me that I needed to really work on my stretch goals and really have like a better strategy in mind. And it also made me realize that I need to involve more of the community with my Kickstarter, in the sense that, you get variant covers in there, or just pinups, have other artists like contribute in some way, and, try and grow from there. So that's kind of like where I'm kind of heading in the future. But the thing that I found really difficult about Kickstarter in general, when I'm at a convention, I can talk to people, and if you're not interested, it's not a big deal. I kind of shrug it off because I know that there's going to be like 5 other people walking, down the aisle. When I go on Facebook every day, or on Twitter every single day, or on Instagram every single day, and I start saying, hey, I got a Kickstarter, it sounds really cool at first, but then you get a week into your campaign, and now you just realize, it's not someone like me should know that that's just, it doesn't matter. Just keep pounding just keep beating the drum. But when you have full days where you don't see anything happen at all, and especially those like, the dreaded middle of your campaign, the peak of your campaign,
the dead zone, right?
The dead zone. Yeah. And there's really no, like, I always try and ask, like, what do you do during the dead zone? Like last time I decided to make a commercial. It was the stupidest fucking commercial ever, but I knew it was dumb, and I wanted to do it because it was funny, and I wanted to show people like, hey, I'm still in it. But just generally speaking, like by the time the campaign ended, I was so stressed out. I was so happy that I made my goal, but I always kind of wish that I could have done better, and I know that I can do better. And, I'm so reluctant to jump on it, but at the same time, I'm hearing what you have to say gets me so excited, because what it sounds to me like is I missed the train that, during this crisis, I could have been on Kickstarter, and I could have said, hey, come and support my book and come and support me. But I just didn't have anything new. And that's another thing about it too, is if you don't have something new, how do you get on the platform and start pitching? I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah. So I mean, I haven't researched. I don't know exactly what, like, can you tell, what were your previous two launches for?
Oh, okay. They were for these two single issues here. So this is the latest book I released, Eastern Shin Hunter and Destroyer #1, and it's the last part of my trilogy. So I got the first issue of this funded, and I got the book that came out before it, our 8th issue, funded on Kickstarter, and it's a double-sized book. So I had to run 2 campaigns for this one simultaneously. One was in Korea and one was in the US. And I had a kind of like a Korea Kickstarter company, like they were translating everything I was posting, and they were a tremendous help. And it was through that campaign that I managed to get like a publishing deal in Korea, and I ended up going to Korea for like a week and like really like pushing the release of my book, which I never imagined could happen. It's amazing what Kickstarter the potential that it can bring, even if you don't make your goal, or even if you don't think that you're doing that well on there. And
yeah. I mean, that's awesome that happened. You know, we had foreign licensing deals that we put together to get some of our children's books translated into multiple foreign languages, all from people that discovered us on Kickstarter. So that's definitely, you know, a cool thing that can happen. So, I mean, one of the things that a lot of the most creative people that I know in terms of their books suffer from is that they tend to be very, very linear in thinking when it comes to their marketing or their outside stuff. And I'm not saying that's necessarily you, but
it is me. I will straight up say it's me.
But a lot of people have like this definition in their head of, well, this is what a Kickstarter is for, can be for. And the question I usually have is, says who? Because the rules on Kickstarter are pretty wide open. And so I don't know what you'd want to launch, but I can give you an example of a creator in our community. Let's see. So there have been a lot of examples of creators that have found ways to, you know, remix and relaunch. Will Allred is a creator who a few years ago was able to successfully launch his graphic novel for a book called Diary of Night. And he's a writer. And so he actually doesn't have, he's not an artist. And so he had seen some creators do things like, hey, I'm going to release an artist do like a limited run of 100 artist edition sketch cover versions of my comic, right? And I will sell those at a premium, but also sell some of my backlist. So just basically new cover, same #1, and you can get an artist edition sketch cover. They go over well at conventions and everything, but that could be a Kickstarter. But Will saw stuff like that. He's like, all right, I've got these 600 books that are taking up space in my garage, and I don't have any conventions coming up. What can I do with them? Well, he came up with a concept of doing diary editions of Diary of Night, where he would handwrite or maybe it was typed up. I don't remember. He might not have good handwriting, but he would insert a diary edition written from the main character, custom. You know, each one is original. You know, diary entry from him. And insert that in the book that was already existed, that already printed. And he did a launch for a diary edition and maybe also had some extra, you know, prints and a couple of other merch that wasn't included in the first Kickstarter campaign. But that became a launch. That became something to rally his fan base in, and, you know, sold some books, moved some copies, got more awareness. And that's something that like is important, is like, launching builds awareness. And so the more you launch, and the more opportunity that you have to rally your existing fan base, but also attract a new one. And so if you have product, if you have, and you know, it's going to be a long time before the next thing is ready, then figuring out something to do to, you know, add a remix or a respin or a twist on what you already have, could be something that would be very smart. Another creator that I know, Kevin Laporte, his company just celebrated 10 years. So they produced like a box, a custom box, and produced a box full of number ones and some of their top selling issues and some other cool merch and swag, and did a 10-year anniversary box launch. You know, a lot of options out there. And so we don't need to just be hamstrung about like, this is what a Kickstarter is and this is what it isn't. And they can be big, they can be small. It doesn't really matter. What matters is it's something that you can get excited about and your audience can get excited about too.
You know what? I'm so glad I spoke to you, because now I know why I've had so many hangups. So as I was completing my first Kickstarter on the eve before the convention, before the campaign ended, what happened was I was like, all right, I'm going to go. I was at a convention and I had people giving me money at the convention for the Kickstarter. Like they were pre-ordering the book at the convention. And I was like, all right, cool. Well, this will make up, this will help me get, past my goal. And it did. And sure enough, someone messaged me within the community and they said, you can't do that. And I was like, what do you mean I can't do that? And I was so terrified that someone at Kickstarter was going to like blow the whistle on me and all the work I've done for my campaign would all be for nothing and I would lose all the money and everything. I was, Tyler, I can't tell you how terrified I was because I just honestly didn't know. So
they were handing you cash, but how is that affecting what was going on Kickstarter?
No. They were actually like, if I saw them, I actually got them to back the campaign on the phone.
Oh, while they were
so I was doing it that way. And
so what's wrong with that?
Well, he was thinking that what I was doing was, funneling money into my campaign or something like that. It was really foolish. But it still scared me because I had written about it and maybe the way I worded it was wrong, but you know how you write up an update and then after 30 minutes, you can't edit it anymore. It's out. And I was pretty scared about it. And I think that, how sometimes things happen in life where you get like, something happens unintentionally or someone says something to you and then all of a sudden it sticks in the back of your head. There's a psychology to this whole Kickstarter thing, or just in general, that, you have to have really thick skin to do it and be able to, get through these campaigns and understand that, even if you don't make your goal or whatever, you'll get to the next point. So I guess, I got over that, but there's still like the resonance of that experience that have kind of like lingered over me of what I can and can't do. You know what I mean? Bringing it back to what you were saying.
I mean, there's a lot of that. And most of the time it's just these are just thoughts. These aren't facts. These aren't like reality things. The person that told you not to do that, a quick question. Did that person, I don't know if he was a creator or not, but did that person has that person sold like significantly more comics than you?
I couldn't tell you. I mean, we were both doing campaigns at the same time. Yeah. He had funded, I think he did a magnificent job and he did a much better job of funding his campaign than I did. I mean, he had a steady growth. It was kind of like, he didn't have that middle point. It was like every week he was just raising, a good amount of money, and he must have had a plan on who to tap into at certain points. But again, it's like tapping into, like, you try and reach out to as many places as you can to try and get attention, and tapping into them doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get backers from those areas, especially at the times that you hit them. It's almost like you have to have like a strategy for constantly hitting everybody, because some days one person's going to see this, another day someone's not going to see that. I mean, and then I also hear, a lot of people have given me the suggestion of messaging people on Facebook, and then you get blocked on Facebook because you can't send messages anymore. And that's what I did with my last campaign. I was messaging everybody and I hated that. Yeah. Because I hate getting those messages. It's like, I don't mind them. If it's you sending me a message and being like, hey, Onrie, can you support my campaign, or can you take a look at it or share it? That's cool, because I know you, but I don't want to be that guy who hits somebody I don't know up and be like, hey, support my Kickstarter. We don't fucking talk ever, but hey, so give me money, like I didn't want to be that guy. But after I hit the launch button, it's like, now I'll be whatever I need to be in order to make my goal. Because otherwise, you lose out. And I I hate the idea of getting blocked or getting, or feeling like I'm doing something I shouldn't while I'm doing the campaign, because in and of itself, it's already a lot of work.
Right.
You're working 24 hours around the clock.
Yeah. And, this is why having a solid plan after you hit that launch button is so key. I've done 20 successful launches, and I've been teaching this Kickstarter for 5 years now. But even me, having done this and done countless podcasts and stuff, like, I still go and I print out my checklists, the same checklist that I give Comics Launch Pro members, the same promotion stuff, the same daily execution guides. Like, I print all that stuff out for myself before every single launch, because I'm human. And if I'm not careful, like, I'm going to hit the green launch button and then just start hitting refresh on my campaign and hoping that that's going to make a difference, when that never makes a difference. And so what I like to do is I like to hit launch and then just get going through my action steps, making sure that, that I'm just executing on the plan that I've already laid out, the stuff that I already know works, and being focused on action as opposed to, all the what ifs and everything. And so that's definitely something that is important, especially if you're going to do a longer campaign, because a Kickstarter campaign isn't just one thing, right? It's not this one experience. Like, Kickstarter pages are magic for like that first day and a half. Most Kickstarter pages that I see, like, they will convert at something, like 10, 20, 25, 30% even, meaning that for every 100 people that hit your page, you might have 25 of those people that actually go and back and give you money. Like, that's unheard of on the internet. Like, that's special. But by day 7, your conversion rate usually drops to 1 to 2%, which means that if you don't drive 100 people to your Kickstarter campaign that day, then you have no real business expecting to get any funding that day. So it's very important to take, you almost have to take a step back, detach a little bit from the emotion of the launch and the money, and am I good enough, and is my campaign doing well, and what if, should I do this, should I do that? You got to detach a little bit, be a little dispassionate, and just kind of focus on the actions, the metrics, and the numbers. And that's a lot of that's mindset stuff. One of the things that's actually helped me get better at Kickstarter campaign is actually, working on other people's launches, because, I'll have creators that are like freaking out. Oh my God. Like, why isn't this working? And these are creators that have had success before. And it feels so much harder this time around. And I try to quickly get them away from the feeling, because we can, like, I've had creators that raise $25,000 and they feel like it's a failure. And I've had creators that raise $2,500 and they're like the most grateful people on planet Earth. It's all relative. And we can, as human beings, we can all normalize everything. And so when you're in a launch or when you're in marketing mode, you got to just focus on the data and not the internal drama. And really just focus on, are people getting my Kickstarter page? If not, okay, then I got a traffic problem, and that's where you go towards. And the cool thing is there's a lot of things that you can do to address those. And one of the things that is most important, and that I think is good for you, because you're obviously making an effort to reach out to creators in the community, is having the back and having other creators that have your back and that are aware of you and what you're doing and how it's cool, and other creators, especially that are building Kickstarter backer lists and Kickstarter audiences themselves. Because what you'll find is a lot of the biggest Kickstarter projects in the comics category, especially, and this is one of the things that's special about comics, like, most people don't realize that just about every category on Kickstarter is flat or has gone down in terms of the success rate. Like, you look at the success rate for tech products. It's, 19% or 20% or whatever, and it hasn't changed. It hasn't budged. And the reason for that, big part of the reason for that, is there's no community for tech projects on Kickstarter. There's no community for music projects on Kickstarter really, but there's a awesome community.
There's a community
in
for comics. Yeah.
And so, I'll like a Kickstarter project will launch, and my feed, because I follow a ton of creators, my feed starts blowing up with 4 or 5 creators who I respect that are backing this Kickstarter project. Kickstarter is notifying me about that automatically, and that's going to pop in my feed, and that's popping in all the feeds of everybody that's following all those other creators.
Yeah. So having that tap into other creators who have had successful campaigns and who are now supporting you is a major thing. I'm very interested in the Comics Pro program, and I'm going to be straight up with you. I really want to do it before my next campaign because I just want to see what the difference is. And what I really like about what you said is everything, because much like when I get to conventions and I'm on the floor and I'm working, I don't give a shit about the drama anymore. I don't care if I got into a fight with somebody or if I'm not feeling good. That doesn't fucking matter anymore. Once you're on the floor, you got to focus on the job that you're there to do. Yeah. And it's the same thing with Kickstarter. For me, because of my lack of experience with the platform, I did the things that I've trained myself not to do at conventions. And I like how you mentioned the checklist, because I think that is such an important thing. Go to the checklist. Stop hitting that refresh button. I agree with you 100%. It's the thing I hate the most about Kickstarter. Yeah. Is just constantly, did I get, you wake up every morning, did I get any backers? Is anybody and then you have those days where you don't get anything and you feel like you're failing. And, it's interesting because, I agree with you. You meet people who have the $2,500 versus the $25,000, rush or, dissatisfaction, there's a lot to be said about that.
Yeah. It's funny, like so much of the game, I have all the strategies, I have all the tactics, I've tried everything out. And then I also, the community is very smart. So you see other creators trying new stuff out all the time, but I've really found that so much of it is the mental game. And if you can get through, if you can conquer the mental game, then you can just get out of your own way and execute. But a lot of creators, especially when they get that dead zone, they'll talk about their campaign slowing down. And when I dive a little deeper, you realize they slowed down first. They stopped the momentum. They started second guessing themselves or questioning themselves. They started paying more attention to other people's projects than their own. And getting and conquering that and getting their head right. And also understanding that, if your campaign slows down, you're normal. Because I can take Scott Snyder's Kickstarter project, right? That just raised buku bucks, right? And chart that as a graph. Guess what? That one slowed down significantly compared to where it started throughout. It's just a matter of, scale. And so it's important to just keep that stuff in mind. But one of the cool things that we added this year to Comics Launch Pro, and this is something that was this is sort of the one thing that, for the education side of my business, the one thing I sell, which is the Comics Launch Pro community. And you sort of just get access to everything now. There was a time when I was sort of all right, what are the main things that comic creators need? And I'll just make one little course for that and they'll be good and sell those all separately. And I just decided, you know what? These things are all puzzle pieces and they all fit together. And so I just sort of, one offer, one main community and let's go. But one of the things that I did add to Comics Launch Pro, which I think has been helpful for a lot of creators, is a back channel where it's just there's a subgroup just of creators that are in our community and have projects that are live on Kickstarter right now. And so what's cool about this little back channel group, and I'm in there, other coaches that are inside of Comics Launch Pro are in there, but it's also creators that are in the trenches right now. And when I first started Comics Launch and first surveyed the audience, in the early days, one of the things that kept coming up that I thought was really interesting and I resonated with when I was surveying creators that had launched projects on Kickstarter is this concept of how lonely it felt when you were in the midst of a Kickstarter campaign. It's
It is.
Yeah.
It is
Oh,
extremely lonely.
sorry about that. We
No,
have
no,
we have a kitchen
it's
that
okay.
goes off every time my wife steams anything.
It's
Sorry,
quite all right.
Facebook. And my little boy like freaks out every time.
It's okay. I know that sound too well. We manage some properties, and we've just recently changed out the smoke alarms there. So
Oh yeah, yep. There you go. But yeah, but this idea that like no one cares as much about my project as me, and the ebbs and flows, and you feel like you're just sort of like one person like shouting out into the void. And so this concept of like, hey, you don't have to launch alone. Sometimes, you know, even if it's not with our community, if you just find one other creator that's like, hey man, you know, you've got a project, I've got a project, let's launch together. Let's have a couple conversations like this. Cause like, you know, it's a lot easier probably for you to have this conversation than it would be to just talk about your Kickstarter, you know, like it'd be much more fun probably too, to talk about and interview each other about live Kickstarters. And so that's a lot of what's going on inside the back channel now. Creators are finding ways to share each other's projects in their email list, share each other's, do joint live streams, do cross promotional things, back both projects and get X as a bonus. And that really, you know, one of the things that I'm happy is that just I've been able to facilitate that. And, you know, especially in a time when conventions are, you know, few and far between, that for most creators, that's the only time where they get to interact with other creators. And so, you know, the other cool thing about COVID, or like a, you know, a silver lining anyway, I don't think there's much cool about it, but one silver lining is, you know, inside our community, I also do the 2 monthly live coaching sessions. One's focused on Kickstarter and one's focused on audience growth. So those are kind of the 1-2 punch of what we're really focused on in our community. But attendance has been way up for creators, and people are connecting and doing, because, you know, if you can't go outside, if it's dangerous, if things are shut down, you might as well work on your business and your creative life. So it's been fun to do.
Yeah, and you know, I think that this is the time to do that. It's either the time to grow your business, or it's the time to really focus on your creative work. And you know, there has been a lot of silver linings for me this year, in the sense that I finally had the time to actually work on a new project, and getting it up and running and doing all that has been a lot of fun. But it's also made me very sort of like negligent of the business side, because, you know, as soon as conventions got canceled, I was just like, you know what, this year's just a wash, and it's going to be when it's going to be. I'm not going to go out there and try and push my stuff directly. I'm going to get to know my contemporaries more, which is total silver lining. That's what led me to talking to you right now, and really looking at what you're doing and taking it much more seriously, because this isn't going to be an excuse next year. You know, like when, you know, once 2021 hits, COVID is still going to be here. I don't think it's going anywhere. And who knows when conventions will come back. I want to be optimistic and say that it's going to be March, but there's talk that it may not be until way into next year, you know, maybe even around this time next year. So you either have two options at this point. It's either adapt or die. And, you know, I would rather adapt. I'd rather learn and see what other people are doing, and see how to do it. And what I think is so great, you proved the point about comics having this community, is the fact that something like what you're offering on Comics Launch Pro actually exists. And I know that you have, you not only have a reputation, I've seen you in the field for a long time, but you've also interviewed and worked with a lot of creators that, you know, have actually done it. I mean, when you're talking about coaches and stuff, you're not just bringing people out of the blue. You're actually working with people that have done this and are doing it constantly. So I think that changes the game. It's, to me, what I look at Comics Launch Pro is it's like a dojo for all of us looking to improve our digital game. And that's something that I know I've always had problems with, because it's like, you know, when you launch something on Facebook, or when you announce something on Facebook, you always want to get like Scott Snyder numbers in your retweets or follows. And sometimes it's the most random things you say that actually get people's attention. So as we're kind of bringing this to a close, I just have a question for you. When it comes to like making a social media post that doesn't quite get the amount of attention that you want it to do, what is your next what's the next thing you suggest doing for other creators? Like, what can we do to like really get more attention on that thing that we want to say, even though people on Facebook may not necessarily see it?
Yeah. I mean, I have mixed feelings about social, just because I'm sort of at the point in my life where I do not have a lot of time to spend focused on going for vanity metrics and things like, likes and shares and even follower accounts, a lot of things that can be manipulated. I am more concerned about the bottom line, getting people to actually read the book, getting people to actually back and exchange value with me, because I know that that's what's actually going to change their life. So I don't know that I've ever done anything that's gone viral. I don't know that I've had a social post that's, I probably have, but I don't pay attention to those metrics, so I don't even know what they would be.
Because it's not reflective of your business by any means,
right?
It's the numbers that count.
And in fact, it cracks me up because I will get, I'll post, I'll post things and I'll get people commenting on my posts, telling me all the things that are wrong with my posts. But none of those people have done anything like on Kickstarter or beyond. And it's like they're coming on to lecture me about my business when they're not even in this game full time. And it's like, they just don't see the whole thing. It's like they don't even know what they don't even know. But for me, I've sort of leveraged that, or I've sort of realized that I'm never going to, like, the Facebook algorithm or the Twitter algorithm, like, they're always going to be one step ahead of us as the creators. And every time you learn a hack or a trick that works, they tweak it the next month and then it no longer works. And so, the flip side is that those platforms, Facebook especially, have built one of the best traffic delivery systems in the history of mankind, which is their advertising platform. So rather than racking my brain and spending hours and hours every single day posting dozens and dozens of things to the same small audience, I'm hoping we'll see it, I instead try to find one or two or a few things that represent the best of what I've got. And I use Facebook ads to show that to thousands, if not tens of thousands of new people every single day. And what that does is it frees up my time, make sure my audience grows every single day. And it makes it so that my message gets out there, whether I am available or at my desk, or it's still getting out there when I'm running around chasing my 2.5-year-old around a playground, making him wear a superhero mask. And so that's sort of the shift that I happened. And like Facebook ads, it's like this whole big scary freaking thing. And I remember, like, when I placed my first ad for $5 a day a long time ago, I was terrified to do that. But I turned them on at one point, and after some fits and starts, I turned them on, and I've never turned them off. And the business has just kept growing and growing and growing. And so, that's one way to go about it if what you are feeling is stressed and overwhelmed and don't know what to say and don't know what to do. And one of the programs that's included in Comics Launch Pro is called Ad Launch, which is like my complete Facebook ad system, and what I use to power my audience building, and then also how to use Facebook ads effectively during a Kickstarter launch. So that's a rabbit hole that you can go down. Like, but really, for a lot of the creators that I work with, like, they're not ready for Facebook ads. They don't have the foundation set up. They're not like, and they're not trying to raise tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. So Facebook ads doesn't really make sense at that. Like, you don't necessarily need that. and they have the time to really develop and cultivate an audience with social. And so if that's what you want to do, great. There's strategies for that really do work effectively, and I'm all for that. But it's nice to have options, and that's one of the best parts about being a creator today.
Tyler, I want to say something before we end this episode. First off, thank you again so much for coming on the show. But second, you have a new student in me. I am going to tell you right now that over the next couple weeks, I will definitely be joining Comics Launch Pro, because I like everything you have sold me, straight up. And anybody who's watching this show, if you haven't been sold, I'll let you guys know how I feel after I take it. But just everything you have told me applies so much to my own philosophies about, doing business and just taking that platform and bringing it to digital. It's really just something that's always been, I guess, a hurdle for me, because I didn't know what to do. For me, we came into this business watching the development of Kickstarter, and we're still seeing it develop. I still think it hasn't gotten to its full potential yet.
I mean, Kickstarter's been sending out surveys to a portion of their user base over the past couple of months, asking them to rate a laundry list of platform improvements that they're considering doing. So you said something earlier like, oh, I'm mad that I missed the boat about back in April or May or whatever. People are like, another boat's coming along, and I guarantee you the Kickstarter platform is going to be better 2.5 years from now, 3 years from now than it is today. And those creators are going to be, crushing it and doing well. So you might as well, really go all in now, establish a beachhead. And as those new things roll out, you're going to be in a better position to take advantage of those. Because, one thing that is absolutely true is the more you launch and fund on Kickstarter, the higher your success rate is, and the more you end up raising and funding on Kickstarter. So, don't feel like you missed the boat, even for creators that there's been creators that have been worrying that the bubble's going to burst for years, and that hasn't happened. And it hasn't happened because most of us have done a damn good job creating great comics, doing awesome launches that engage our audiences, and then actually delivering on our promises, which is what it's all about. And so, that's what Comics Launch Pro likes to help people do. Awesome to hear that you're going to be interested in jumping in.
Yeah.
We actually are. I've got a new bonus that's coming out. New training. First time I've added a new training in a little bit, focused on post-launch profits. So one of the things that a lot of creators have discovered is, hey, I launch, I fund, I succeed on Kickstarter. Yay. Big chunk of money hits my bank account. Yay, yay, yay. And then for the next several months, it's expenses to do the printing, do the shipping, do the postage, fix the mistakes that you made. And so one of the things that I've been able to do over the past several launches is just have a set of plays that I run after every single launch is over, to bring an additional 10-20% of pretty reliable and consistent funding, using some post-launch strategies. And so I'm packaging that up in sort of a new training, because now I'm at the point where most Comics Launch Pro members have launched at least and succeeded at least once. Some of them, we have a couple members that are on like their 25th launch or something like that. So it's kind of crazy. But it's the other cool thing about building that platform is that there's always something new, and there's always things to improve, and it's always evolving. And so I want to stay on the cutting edge, and being connected with creators like yourself helps me keep my finger on the pulse.
Absolutely. Well, you've sold me. So I will definitely be a part of it. As soon as I possibly can. But thank you again so much for coming on the show. Do me a favor. Tell us all where we can find you, where we can throw money in your general direction, or just in your direction, period. This is your final shout out. Feel free to.
Yeah. No problem at all. So if you're listening to this, you're probably either a fan of podcasts or on YouTube. There is a Comics Launch podcast, which is available anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's just COMIX Launch. And you'll be able to find that. It's a weekly show. It's absolutely free. Shows up in your feed. So I would join that. We also are on YouTube at youtube.com/Comics Launch. And then the last thing is a free resource that I'll share with you if you want to know a little bit more about how I get my projects funded and the steps that I take creators through. If you go to comicslaunch.com/roadmap, that will have a free guide that sort of walks you through the stages of a successful launch.
Excellent. Tyler, do me a favor. If you have a couple minutes, just hang out backstage. I'm going to close out the show real quick. I'd love to have a few final words with you.
You got it.
Awesome, man. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you again. What a great guest. And this is a guy that, absolutely knows what he's talking about. And like I said, guys, I'm on board the program. And I want to see how much I can improve and what I can learn. As I'm taking Eastern Shin to a weekly, sales front in the next couple weeks, hopefully, I want to have a strategy in mind. I want to be able to, learn on the go and see where I can go. And it's really great to be able to have a community of people who are doing the exact same thing I am, not necessarily the same way I'm doing it, but people who have their experiences and they can share what their pitfalls are and all kinds of stuff. And that's what's really wonderful about this comics community. And what's really wonderful about all the guests who have taken time out of their busy schedules to sit down and talk with me. So thank you all so much for tuning in. And I will see you guys next week with brand new guests. And until that time comes, onward to victory.